Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving back into some malicious compliance stories. Today we've got 3 tales of people who were told no and responded with paperwork, patience, and precision. One involves a coworker who demanded a fit note and got one so specific it backfired spectacularly. Another, a game store that insisted on prepayment and got 100 foil lands across 40 sets. And the last, a farmer who learned that it's always been done that way isn't a legal document. My coworker wanted me to do more despite my back injury. A few years ago, I wrecked my back at work. Slip discs, the kind that everyone tells you will settle down with rest, except mine didn't. Instead, I ended up with extra damage from months of compensating, awkward posture, uneven gait, muscles overworking in all the wrong places. It became one of those invisible injuries where you look fine until you stand still for too long and suddenly feel like your spine is plotting revenge. I was signed off initially, then came back with a fit note clearing me for light duties. My store team handled it the way good teams do. We shuffled things around. On good days, I could manage self-checkouts for a couple of hours as long as I kept moving. On bad days, standing in one place was out of the question. But I could do tills sitting down, decarding, write-offs, facing up, and putbacks. Delivery and backstock were fine if my back was behaving. We did that for everyone, not just me. If someone had childcare issues, exam stress, a dodgy knee, we adjusted. No one kept score, we just made it work. Everyone except Kelly. Kelly had very strong opinions about fairness, specifically her version of fairness, which involved everyone suffering equally regardless of circumstances. She didn't like that people covered self-checkouts for me on flare-up days. She didn't like that I wasn't hauling delivery cages when my back seized. She didn't like that management trusted my judgment about when I could and couldn't stand still. One Sunday evening, while I was at home trying to stretch the knots out of my lower spine, a message dropped into the staff WhatsApp group from one of the lower managers. Going forward, it read, "Having pain here, so you can't do self-checkouts. Having pain there, so you can't do delivery, will no longer be accepted. Unless you have a fit note, you can't refuse tasks." I stared at the screen. I already had a fit note. It cleared me for light duties. It didn't list every single micro movement I was or wasn't allowed to do. Apparently, that was no longer sufficient. I was scheduled for a closing shift on Monday, which gave me a small window to sort things out. By some miracle, at 8 a.m., I managed to snag a GP callback. If you're in the UK, you know that getting through to a doctor feels like winning a raffle you didn't know you'd entered. When the GP called, I explained everything. The injury, the accommodations, the new directive that unless I had a hyper-specific note, I'd be forced onto tasks that aggravated my condition. There was a pause on the line. "Right," she said finally, and her tone sharpened. "Let's make this crystal clear." An hour later, a new fit note landed in my inbox. That afternoon, I walked into work with the kind of calm that only comes from knowing paperwork's on your side. I handed the amended fit note to the duty manager. He read it once, then he read it again. Then he looked up at me and started laughing so hard he had to lean against the counter. "What did you do?" he wheezed. "I explained," I said sweetly. The new note was a masterpiece. 3 months, no lifting, no pulling, no prolonged standing, no strenuous activity whatsoever. Frequent, regular breaks required. In other words, all the good day tasks I'd been voluntarily taking on to help the team, officially off the table. Self-checkouts? Out. Delivery cages? Absolutely not. Backstock? Not a chance. Even standing at a till for too long would require rotation. I was effectively restricted to the lightest possible duties at all times. No flexibility, no pushing through on better days. Exactly what had been demanded. Word spread quickly. Apparently, Kelly did not take this well. From what I was told later, she stormed into the office demanding to know how I managed to get out of everything. She filed a complaint with the store manager claiming I was abusing the system. The store manager dismissed it immediately after reviewing the medical documentation. That wasn't enough for her. She escalated to the area manager. Same result. The paperwork was airtight. If anything, the company now had even more responsibility to ensure strict compliance with the restrictions. Still not satisfied, she threatened to go to HR about favoritism and management's inaction. That was when she was apparently informed, very calmly, that continuing to pursue the matter could constitute harassment and disability discrimination. The words formal investigation were mentioned, so were company liability and legal risk. The irony was thick enough to butter toast. Kelly wanted a fit note. She got one. A very, very detailed one. She complained up the chain, and each time the response was the same. The paperwork's solid, now stop pushing. The more she pushed, the closer she got to being the problem herself. Funny how that works. For the next 3 months, my rota reflected the new reality. I took only the safest tasks. If something even looked strenuous, I stepped back. When my back felt surprisingly good and I offered to help with a heavier job out of habit, management would shake their heads. Nope, not on that note. Sit down. Kelly, meanwhile, got exactly what she'd asked for. No more flexible adjustments, no more me stepping up on better days to ease the load, everything by the book. One evening, as I was carefully decarding stock while seated, she muttered, "Must be nice." I looked at her evenly. It's a 3-month medical restriction. "You wanted a fit note?" She didn't reply. The rest of the team, they carried on being brilliant. They knew what had happened and treated it like what it was. Someone trying to weaponize fairness and accidentally triggering corporate compliance. By the time the 3 months ended, management had learned a valuable lesson about vague group messages. My original, more flexible accommodations were reinstated without drama. The WhatsApp announcements became noticeably more careful. Kelly never apologized, but she also never raised the issue again. Sometimes all it takes is putting something in writing. After all, you did want a fit note. And our second story. Prepay or nothing, they said. I just got home from this experience and I wanted to share. As a hobby, I've taken to trading card games, Pokemon and Magic the Gathering to be specific. I'm not collecting sealed products, but rather I'm usually buying bulk so that I can make multiple decks and play with my family. This is important because I'm often making huge bulk orders that consist of 50 cards or more. There are a few shops near me, and I'm fortunate enough to be close to about 5 hobby shops that sell Pokemon and Magic singles. I managed to drag my family into the Pokemon TCG hobby roughly a year ago. Since then, the process of making an order was to select from their online stock and check out with the card. At this time, you're given 2 options: pay in advance for your order or pay in the store. Paying in advance, while very sensibly, has often led to cards being paid for that they did not have in stock, as in it was not mistakenly labeled as in stock, but actually was not. This would then result in a refund system that would take 2 to 3 days to complete. The issue is that it was super inconvenient when I had to wait for 2 to 3 days to recoup the money. I personally experienced a transaction of a $10 card that needed to be refunded. So I spoke to one of the staff and they told me, when you have big orders, it's perfectly fine to call ahead of time and we can pick the order when we have time. In fact, as long as you don't abuse this process, it works out for everyone. That staff member's awesome. And so for a year, that's exactly what I did. This process accomplishes 3 things. 1, I'm not paying for a product that couldn't be fulfilled. 2, I would reduce my time waiting because I called ahead of time by 4 to 5 hours. 3, the staff members would have plenty of time to grab the order. I never abused this process and always came through when I said I would come through. Now, this wouldn't be malicious compliance if not for the next part. About 2 months ago, me and my family took the dive into Magic the Gathering because Commander's a blast. This has caused me to start hoarding cards again and making decks for myself and for my family's usage. So I was back into the swing of things again, making 50+ single card orders from this shop that I loved very much. During my usual 4-hour in advance phone call, I was told, "Hey, you have to stop calling in these orders. It's store policy to only pull orders that have been paid for. We won't be pulling your cards until they're paid for." Weird, I was told otherwise, but I'll ask them when I get there. So I get there to pick up and pay for my order and try to explain that this process was something that a previous staff member had told me was A-OK and even encouraged. There were 2 staff members and they both responded again with a very terse and repeated message of, "It's store policy." The message was fine enough, but the tone and rudeness had me floored. They told me from now on, prepay for all of my orders and then come to pick them up. So here's where the malicious compliance begins. It was clear what they wanted me to do, prepay and show up. So a few weeks later, what I did was scroll through their inventory and started the blingification of my decks. I proceeded to spend roughly 40 minutes scrolling through their online inventory and adding to my cart with various amounts of most holofoil basic land card I could find for under $1. For those of you who aren't familiar, these basic lands are pretty cheap, 10 cents to 60 cents each. They also are categorized by sets and as individual printings. So each basic land has its own set and its own foil print version. This means that they would need to hunt each land by set and by foil print. I'd carded roughly 100 cards that they would need to hunt through at least 40 different sets. They would also need to specifically find the foil only of the basic lands. Even more, I gave them an hour of time to pick the order. An hour, while definitely not a lot of time, is more than enough time to grab this order. When I get there, it was one of the two guys that had reinforced the new method of ordering. Even better, he was swamped. He hadn't even started my order. I would have loved to give him the 4 or 5 hours that I normally would give, but it was store policy that I stop calling in advance and just order, pay, and show up. So I wait. I asked if they started my order. He quickly responded with, "Yes, I'm getting to it." I think that even he knew that this would have been much easier if I'd called 4 hours in advance like I normally would. That's the moment. He told you to prepay and show up, so you did exactly that. 100 foil basics across 40 different sets, paid in advance with exactly 1 hour notice. The old system worked for everyone. The new system works exactly as designed, and now he's the one scrambling. This may be strange to say, but I was happy that there were 4 cards that were not available for the order. So I had paid for 4 cards that I would never see fulfilled. You remember this staff member that was awesome? Yeah, he showed up about 30 minutes into my wait and asked if I'd been waiting for a long time. I'd said that it was about 30 minutes. For my wait, he had given me one of the tournament participant packs, and I had actually pulled a $30 card, Roaming Throne. The exchange was made. I waited 40 minutes. 4 cards were missing. I plan on approaching their social media or shop owner and ask for clarification from the establishment on what I should be doing in the future. That'll be something I do in the near future, but for now, I feel vindicated. The staff member had to frantically hunt for the cards and even had to tell me there were cards missing. All things that the previous system avoided. This feels less like revenge and more like a stress test. You stress tested their policy. They said prepay and show up, you did. They said nothing gets pulled early, so nothing got pulled early. Result? A swamped employee digging through 40 sets while you stand there waiting. That's not you being petty, that's you being literal. If they want efficient service for large orders, they need to build a system that supports it. You already had one that worked. If they're smart, they'll quietly go back to it. And our last story. Farmer using our land. When we bought the cottage, we knew it came with quirks. It's in the countryside, surrounded by fields, hedgerows, and long stretches of road where you're more likely to meet a tractor than a car. That was part of the charm. We weren't looking for suburbia, we wanted quiet space. Somewhere our 2-year-old could grow up without streetlights buzzing outside the bedroom window. Beside the cottage is a large open parcel of land. It isn't fenced off from the neighboring field, but according to our deeds and the survey we paid for, a defined portion of it belongs to us. The rest is part of a larger field owned by a woman who lives abroad and, from what we've been told, hasn't been back in nearly 20 years. There are no buildings on her land, just open grass. We don't live there full-time yet. We're finishing up things in our current place and plan to move in a couple of months, so our visits are still occasional, checking on the property, measuring for renovations, letting our toddler run around and explore. On one of those visits, not long after closing, we noticed cows standing inside our fenced yard. Not the neighboring land, ours. The field that's clearly outlined in our paperwork and fenced off from the road. At first I thought maybe it was some kind of mix-up, maybe the previous owner had an arrangement, maybe we were missing something. But then we saw the electric fence. There was a temporary electric line running across part of our land. Not something we had installed. It wasn't even subtle. Bright wire, plastic posts pushed into the soil. Someone had clearly decided to extend grazing into our property. We hadn't given anyone permission. We shrugged it off temporarily, figuring it might get sorted once people realized the place had new owners. Country life, we told ourselves. Things can be informal. Then we came back a couple of weeks later. This time the damage was obvious. A tractor had driven straight through our gate to access the adjoining field. Not only that, but it had ripped up the boundary stakes we'd paid a surveyor to install. Those weren't cheap. They marked exactly where our land ended and the neighboring parcel began. Now they were gone, churned into the mud along with deep tire tracks across our grass. The ground behind the gate was torn up badly, and here's the thing, about 90% of that entrance area is ours. Only a small sliver near the side technically belongs to the neighboring field. There's no easement granting access across our property, none. We double-checked. The deeds are clear. There's also access to that field from the back road. It's not as convenient, but it exists. So there was absolutely no reason to drive through our gate and across our land. The following week, while we were parked there with our car, a man slowed down and pulled over. "Don't go into the field," he said casually. "There's a bull in there." I blinked at him. We had our toddler with us, standing beside the gate. "I'm sorry?" I asked. "There's a bull in the field," he repeated, as if that explained everything. "We just bought this cottage," I said. "We'll be living here full-time in a couple of months." His expression changed immediately. Surprise, then something else. Calculation. "Oh," he said, "right." He introduced himself as the farmer using the field. He lives about 3 kilometers away. When I asked whether he had permission from the landowner, he was vague, very vague. The owner lives abroad and hasn't been around in 2 decades. He'd just been using it. The conversation stayed polite, but it left me uneasy. He acted as if the land was simply his because he'd been grazing it for years. We didn't argue, we didn't escalate on the spot, but as soon as we got home, I contacted our solicitor. I also tried to handle it face-to-face first. I believe in starting civilly. I sent a message explaining that he cannot access the adjoining field through our property, that there's no easement, and that the boundary stakes and ground damage need to be addressed. His initial response was dismissive. He claimed he'd always used that entrance, that it was just the way it's done, that the previous owners never minded. There it is, the classic line. "It's always been done this way." That's not a legal argument, that's just a habit. And habits don't transfer with the deed. The previous owners may have been fine with it, you're not. And you have the paperwork to prove it. But here's the reality. Informal arrangements don't transfer automatically to new owners. And even if they did, we were never informed of any such agreement during the purchase process. More importantly, this isn't just about tire tracks. He put a bull in a field adjacent to a property where a 2-year-old plays, without telling us, without any signage, without any conversation. And he's accessing that field by driving heavy machinery across land he has no legal right to use. The more we looked into it, the clearer it became. If he continues using the land openly and uncontested for long enough, it can create legal complications down the line. Rights of way, claims of access, these things can become messy. So we stopped being casual about it. Our solicitor sent a formal letter. It clearly stated that there is no right of access through our property, that all unauthorized entry must cease immediately, that the boundary markers must be reinstated and any damage remedied. We also contacted the absentee landowner through the registry to inform her that someone is actively grazing her field and accessing it through neighboring private property. If she has a lease in place, she needs to confirm it. If she doesn't, she deserves to know her land is being used. The tone shifted quickly after that. The farmer came back, much more subdued this time. Suddenly, he was willing to talk about alternative access, about fixing the ground, about reinstalling the boundary markers at his expense. Funny how that works. We made it clear, no tractor through our gates again, ever. If he needs access, he can use the back road like everyone else. We're installing a proper lock on the gate and considering additional fencing along the boundary, not because we want hostility, but because clarity prevents problems. We're moving there soon. It's meant to be our home, a safe place for our child. Country living doesn't mean surrendering your property rights. It doesn't mean shrugging when someone drives over your land because that's how it's always been. It means knowing your boundaries, literally, and making sure everyone else does too. Let's talk about who really won. Story 1 was paperwork is armor. Kelly wanted a fit note. She got one so airtight that management couldn't let the OP lift a finger for 3 months. Every complaint she filed bounced off the same document. Story 2 was inconvenienced by the numbers. The store wanted prepayment. They got it. For 100 foil basic lands across 40 different sets with 1 hour to pull them. But Story 3 wins, not because the revenge was clever, though the solicitor's letter was beautifully formal, but because of the stakes. A bull in an unfenced field next to a toddler, tractors tearing up boundary markers. It's always been done this way, isn't a right of way. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.